Welcome to Zeros and Ones, a podcast about philosophy, ancient wisdom, and the meaning of life. Here is your host, Becca Thompson.
Do you guys know that one? That is In the Mood. I believe it was Glenn something. You guys can look it up for me. I used to love listening to music in the 1940s with all the things that people do. Okay, so welcome back to the podcast, Zeros and Ones, where we discover the meaning of all things together. Again, reminder, my book, One, The Biography of All Things, is coming out around Christmas time. The exact date will be announced soon. So today we're going to talk about ethics, what people would consider morals, okay? And we're starting here because we have to establish and embrace the fact that each of us has our own moral framework. We all have our own view of ethics. All of us do. All of us do. And it is completely 100% individual. So there are, if there are 7 billion people on the planet, there are 7 billion different versions of what is ethical, moral to do. Now, many of us align with each other to a degree. And this is where religion comes in, but it's also where politics comes in, plainly. Like, let's be 100. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people in the realm of politics have the same energy around it, the way that people have their energy around religion. Like, it cannot be questioned, right? That's dogma. And the leaders are, to be deified to a certain degree, right? And, whereas religion presumably worships God, which we're going to talk a lot about that word, because it is not the same, despite what Pope Francis might want to think, to each religious sector. There's a deity in every aspect. And I would argue in the world of politic, which that didn't go on our list, but that is one of the ancient topics. We're going to talk about that suffix soon enough. Words matter. Words deeply and profoundly matter. And we're going to, that's a huge part of our journey. But so when we have this, when we go that route, that religion, the religious aspect of a deity does take over in politics. And the thing that's deified are the ideas, but as you will find out, I would argue that God is also an idea. So this is okay. So all of us have our own moral framework. So again, we start with a quote from the ancients. It is our choice of good or evil that determines our character, not our opinion of good and evil. And that's Aristotle. So let your brain chew on that one. Okay, so let's talk about what it means to be ethical or ethic, okay? Words matter. Where words come from matters. And so the word ethic, if you were to look it up in like the OED, Oxford English Dictionary, which if you want a good book, The Professor and the Madman, just throwing that out there. Because if you don't know where the definitions of words come from, holy bananas. When you realize that, you're like, there's power in words. There is power in words. And if you think that politics in the past did not play a role in how our language has iterated, I would argue, is there any spot of life right now? I would offer up to you, is there any spot of life right now where politics has not infused it, right? I mean, people went crazy with Taylor Swift and the childless cat ladies thing, right? So Taylor Swift got involved in politics. Our Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback, of the Chiefs right now, one of the, big athletes, had to address politics, right? Even though he didn't want to make any sort of endorsement, it was still out there, right? So if you think that politics wasn't involved in the ways that we use words in the past, then yipes, okay? So Daniel Webster is a very powerful person off Oxford English Dictionary, which was put together. Profession of the Madman, great book. Highly recommend if you're a reader, which hopefully everybody is. So the word ethic is often defined as a moral framework, okay? But then we go, well, what does that mean? And if you look to the Latin word, more or mos is defined as custom, okay? So for me, out of the gate, you might say, whoa, wait, what? Because custom is a very different connotation in our world right now than ethics, right? But when you think of the idea of that, it came down from just what is it that you do? What is it that your family did? What is it that your community does/did? And by community, you might mean a church group, you might mean a school, you might mean your neighborhood organization, you might mean, again, like-minded politically people. That the ethical framework, in a way, is kind of a group thing. Don't you? It's true. So let's think of this for a little bit. I mean, what would you say are your customs that help expose your ethics, right? Let's say you exercise every day, you run every day, okay? You have an ethic of positive health, right? Does that come from a moral framework that I believe that it is morally right and good to be physically fit, to love my body? Maybe one of your customs is to wake up every morning and pray, okay? Is that part of your moral ethical framework, that I am a better person? I don't want to, I am tapping into something larger than me and giving it service and giving it obeisance because of the fact that this is of value to me, to show myself to be someone who values a higher power, okay? This is what we go on all the time, right? What are we challenging? For me personally right now, I have done all these things. I've had a lot of discipline, and I continue to have discipline, because for me, my ethical framework is, if you have discipline, you really extract the marrow out of life, out of the life experience, right? If I have discipline, it shows that I respect myself and my fellow human being. That is the logic behind my ethical framework. And I know we haven't talked about logic yet, but we got to start somewhere, right? Let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. Okay, when you read, you begin with A, B, C. When you talk about philosophy, you begin with ethics and me. I don't know, whatever, right? Okay, so I think that no one can decide your ethical framework for you. And I that's why I wanted to start here. Because everything in this book that I'm talking about is universal. As much as anything can be declared as universal. It is the Three Musketeers, all for one and one for all. It is one, the biography of everything. Okay? Everything. So it is important that we understand that. So let's think about this. If you want to play along, maybe you're in your car listening, maybe you're listening while you're doing work. Take a moment and just think, what is your current ethic? Okay? What is your current ethic? Is it that I believe that everybody has a right to live their best life? Okay? What does that mean, right? What does that look like? I believe that God is the eternal arbiter of good and evil, and I'm just here to navigate in the meantime. I don't know, right? And then when you've done that, you can pause this if you're listening. And then my second question would be, what is the ethic you were raised in? Okay. What did your caretakers, what was their ethical framework? And our caretakers are obviously usually our parents. But it can go beyond. Personally, I have an incredibly large family of aunts and uncles and all that kind of stuff and cousins. And that communal ethic was often at odds with each other, one side of my family to the other. It was not a singularity. So maybe say, oh, my formative ethic was, um, this one thing, or maybe it was a lot of things, or where did people place value and where did they tell you to place value? And this is not always easy to come up with because though words matter, actions, as we all know, speak louder. So, the ethic that your caretakers maybe claim to raise you with were different than their actions. We'll get into that at a different time because that's about them, though. We want to make this about us. So what is your current ethical framework, and what was the framework you were raised in, or your formative ethic? And then I want you to kind of compare and contrast. Okay? And I would argue this. They're either very, very similar or they're polar opposite. Because, and we're going to get into that when we get to set 2. Okay, let's not get too excited yet. And the duality that we regularly seek to do the opposite, like George Costanza. I'm going to do the exact opposite of everything I've ever done. And what does George do? He ends up with a beautiful girlfriend and a job with the New York Yankees and a better apartment than the one that he had. But this is how we view life, right? So just take a moment for yourself. And everybody, again, everybody's going to be different. This is not about your friend. This is not about your spouse. It's not about your children. It's not about your parents. It's about you. It's about you. And each of us get to think that, so I'm going to give you a personal example so you don't feel too affronted. I am no longer with my son's father. We're married. We were divorced. And the reason we got divorced is a lot of this very topic, right? And a lot of marriages end because of that, because this is the inherent, this is why we're starting here. This is like the primo, how do we view the world, right? What do we value? How do we value this? What are our customs? And what do we think is just and right? Okay? Because we live in the dual. And this is like exceedingly challenging for just about everybody. But when I was married, my former spouse and I had some really good friends, a lot of different married couple friends, right? And depending on who we were with, we would be able to talk about certain things. And we would only talk about things we agreed on, right? So with some friends, we would talk about politics. With other friends, we'd talk about the church. With other friends, we'd talk about, Hollywood. And you find yourself in these gloomy, we just want to get along, have fun, mock the same things and applaud the same things. And for me personally, I started to feel like I was in a rabbit hole of groupthink and I just wanted to bust out. And I ended up not saying anything at all because I just didn't agree the same way that a lot of them agreed. And you know what? The reality is we probably each didn't perfectly agree and align on everything, but we said that we did, right? And I think that is one of the things of why I want to start here and talk about it with you is, also challenge you, like where do you sit at tables, if I can say it that way, with friends or family where you just smile and nod to get along? And I'm curious, do you think it's possible? Is it possible in your world? Okay, because everyone's world is different. And I'll tell you this right now. My world, it is becoming possible, but I've worked very hard at this. But is it possible? Is it even possible to state disagreements at these tables at all without it devolving into friction, right? And I'll call knockdown, drag out fights friction. So, yeah, everybody has their own ethical framework. my mother used to talk about a work ethic, right? And that's definitely like a work ethic is a value judgment. When I see people not working as hard as maybe they could, and I'm not saying you have to work at the things that I want to work at. I'm just like in general, I'm like, oh man. And I didn't realize how judgy I was on that until I saw people who didn't work as hard as I did. I think a lot of us have that because we are one and we're getting to that. That's the whole point. So this is why our brains want to be dictator of our world. So yeah. So let's talk about the United States for a little bit since I'm an American. When we have the framework of our law, which we're going to talk about that word, law, laud, Lord. The law is the laud of the land, of the Lord of the land. We were founded on what is called the Judeo-Christian ethic, which involves the Ten Commandments. We were also founded on an ethic of the Freemasons. Let's be plain, okay? Now, that is what our nation was set up on. And our nation, if you didn't know this, is itself a corporation. That happened after the Civil War. That's a different topic. But where we actually legally became a corporation. And I believe that you could look at a nefarious account for why that happened and how that happened. And then you could look at a more benevolent account. And I am a firm believer that actually it's a little bit of both. But it was meant to protect the ideology by making it actually a corporation. As this like one world government is moving forward. That's a whole different topic. But so I don't know if you know this, but the Declaration of Independence originally said life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. Okay. But of course we changed that to happiness, which would consider that's the driving force of our ethic. So let's talk about society and ethics, right? Because things are set up with the idea of a universal, cohesive, connected ethic. Okay? So in our nation, we'll just use the United States of America because that's where I live and that's where I've always lived and I'm a citizen. I've visited other places and you probably have too. But I'm gonna guess that you've been a citizen of whatever country you live in for your entire life. There are immigrants, there are migrants, there are emigrants, but most people retain the citizenship of their home nation where they were born. So what do we value, right? So I'm gonna pose another question to you. Does a society value murder? Can you think of a society that values murder or adultery? Just think about that. And you might immediately go, no one would do that. Wouldn't they though? Wouldn't they? I mean, can you think of an example right now where you feel, again, this is personal, where you feel that murder has been encouraged or adultery has been like, nah, no big deal, right? I don't know. I'm asking you, this is for you to answer, okay? And then the question would go, okay, well, there are a lot of people who say, well, in the United States, I'm totally against murder, but I'm for the death penalty, right? Or I would never have adultery or commit adultery, but if somebody I knew was in a bad situation, right? So then the question becomes, well, who's the judge, right? And as Shakespeare the Bard says, aha, there's the rub. There's the rub. Because we are each individuals, and yet as a collective in our nation, we are trying to do it together. Okay? So as we stated at the very beginning, and in the middle, and then now, ethic is a very completely personal word. So because we're trying to move forward in our discussions together, not with an individual thing, but with the universal, okay, the question then becomes that you need to find your ethic, right? Are you okay with these things? and then bring that honestly to the table of further discussions, right? With anybody, right? Because therein is the judgment, the gap, okay? And we're going to talk about scripture, but that gap, I grew up, doesn't matter. The gap between my ethic and your ethic, or your ethic and some third party's ethic, right, is what I would argue is what we call original sin. Because each of us get our ethic for a reason, right? But are you open to hearing someone else's, right? And are they open to hearing yours? And can you find commonality versus being intractably in place? I would argue right now in the United States, at least, we are in a very intractable place. Okay? So let's go back again to the word ethic. Okay? Ethic is from the old word ethos. Okay? And then ick is the suffix ic, ick, means of or pertaining to. Okay? So when we say ethics, we're saying the ideas pertaining to the ethos, okay, of what we're doing, of the habitual custom of moral character. And again, mores means custom, okay? So ethics, we got to define this if we're moving forward. We're going to define a lot of words. Things pertaining to the habits of our actions, which define our morals, okay? It's that's how I would define ethics, and that's the ethics that we're going to move forward with. So we create our ethics. And now I'll leave you with this because we're going to the one. This is one of the key problems, challenges. Is a personal versus global ethics. One of the key challenges to the toroidal circles of everything. We're going to talk about that. So I really appreciate you coming on in. We're going to have a good time together. That is episode 1 of 20. We'll probably have some more, but it's going to take 20 to get through all of our topics, and hopefully I can convince you that everything is one. And by everything, I mean actually everything. Okay? Do our mathematics. I'll talk it out because this is a podcast. But thank you so much for joining me again. My book comes out right before Christmas, and we're going to have a good time together. All right. I will talk to you when I talk to you on the next time. Have a good day, amigas, amigos.
Thank you so much for listening to Zeros and Ones with Becca Thompson. Please subscribe and share.